if you look at some of these internet people, I know so many of them. Elon is so terrific, but I know now all of them, you know, they all hated me in my first term, and now they're kissing my ass, you know? Do you know? It's true. All of them. It's true. It's amazing. It's nicer this way. Now, in the first, you know, they didn't know what happened because I won an election that, you know, there was never a businessman that won a presidential election. Out of 100%, 8% were generals and 92% were politicians. Not even admirals, not even just generals. There are 8 generals: General Washington, General Grant, generals, General Eisenhower. But 8% were generals and 92% were politicians. And when I ran, everyone said, well, he can't win. He's a businessman. That's not going to work. And, you know, but you have a natural instinct for things. I guess I had a natural instinct. I said to somebody, was I a better businessman or a politician? And they said, well, there are a lot of guys that made a lot of money, but there's only one guy that became president that was a businessman, so I guess you're a better politician. But I don't think of myself as a politician. I think of myself as a businessman, and I'm proud of that. And I've applied business instinct, and that's why I think you're seeing us doing so well. Second of all, and very importantly, you have to love what you do, okay? You have to. I rarely see somebody that's successful that doesn't love what he or she does. That's way you really like work isn't work. It's fun. I find it fun. I work all the time, and I find it fun. If I didn't find it fun, I wouldn't be successful, whether it was real estate or in showbiz. I had a lot of different careers, but I loved real estate so much, and I was very successful at real estate because I loved it. I learned a lot from my father because I watched him work. He worked he was a workaholic. He worked. He loved to work. He's a good man. He was a tough guy, tough as hell, actually. Now that I think back, I don't know if you could even get away with that nowadays. He was tough, but he was a good man, I'll tell you. And he worked 7 days a week. He worked Saturdays, Sundays. It didn't matter. And I learned by watching him, he loved his life. He loved what he was doing. He had a great long-term marriage, a long, many years. He beat me on that one. No, mine are very successful, but they haven't lasted quite as long. It was close to 70 years. That was a long time. I said, Pop, you beat me on that one. But you know what I learned from him? That he loved life, and all he did was work. I see people that don't work hard, and they're miserable. So go out and find. But he loved what he was doing. And you have to find something that you love, and you have to follow your own instincts. Listen to your parents. They're very wise, but you have to follow your instincts and your heart, your soul, and you want to be the very, very best you can be. Treat every day like a home game against Auburn. Fight like hell and enjoy doing it, and your coach can tell you all about that. Third thing is to think big. You know, you're going to do something, you might as well think big, because it's just as tough. You can think small. I know a lot of people, they thought small. They're very smart. I know others that weren't nearly as smart, but they had a better picture of the big picture, because it's just as hard to solve a small problem as a big problem, and it's just as much energy and everything else, except the result is going to be a smaller one. So love what you do, but think big if it's possible. Now, if it's not possible, that's okay too. You do something, you have to do something that you love. You will have all the same headaches and challenges, all the same delays and setbacks, so you might as well do something that's just amazing. America doesn't aim small, Alabama doesn't aim small, and neither do you. So think big when possible, think big. Fourth is work hard. Work hard. Never, ever stop. An example is a great athlete, actually, Gary Player, golfer, great golfer. He wasn't as big as other men. He was actually on the small side. Don't tell him that, friend of mine. Don't tell him that, because he doesn't understand that. But he worked very, very hard. He made up for it. He never stopped. He won 168 golf tournaments. Think of that, 100. I said, Gary, you're winning like every weekend. Do you ever choke or anything? I don't know what choke means. And he made a statement years ago that I read, and I thought it was sort of an incredible statement. He said, it's funny, the harder I work, the luckier I get, right? Think of that. The harder I work, the luckier I get. So you really have to work hard, and you're going to be successful because you have the talent. To get into this school is not easy. To get through it is even more difficult. You have a lot of talent. Fifth is don't lose your momentum. You just want to keep it going. And you have to know if you are losing it, you have to know when you're losing it. So maybe you stop and maybe it's time to stop. Listen to the feedback. Think through your plan very carefully and keep moving fast. The word momentum is very important. I mean, I'll just tell you a little story about a great real estate developer named William Levitt. He built Levittown. Some of you might live in a Levittown. He was the biggest developer in the whole country in the 1940s and so. And he built these jobs. He started with one house, then 2 houses, then 20 houses, then thousands and thousands of houses. And a company, Gulf and Western, came along and they said, we're going to make you an offer to buy your company. And they offered him a lot of money, more money than he ever thought he could make. And he retired, lost his momentum. He retired. And he led a beautiful life. He had a wife, I must tell you. It was his second wife. It was a trophy wife. What can I say? I don't like telling you everything, but we're all friends, right? Can we talk? We're all friends. He had a trophy wife. And he lived a different life. He moved to the south of France, but he it was a life of tremendous luxury. He had so many millions of dollars. He was given a fortune for the company. And 10 years went by, and then 15 years went by, and he got a call from this big conglomerate, Gulf and Western, and they said, we're not doing well with the purchase, because he used to pick up every nail, every piece of sawdust, every piece of wood, every chip, everything, and he'd sell it. He'd make a couple of bucks. Everything was perfect. They can't do that. You know, these big companies, they don't do that. You see it a lot when an entrepreneur sells to a big company and then he ends up buying the company back for peanuts later on. Happens a lot. But he was the best at what he did. But 15 years went by and he was so excited, and they sold him back his company. And he started, and he was going to tear apart the world because he got bored with a life of luxury. And he started building and building and building. And the markets turned on him. And he went bad, he lost everything, and he went bankrupt, absolutely bankrupt. And it was a sad story to read. It was such an amazing story because he was so rich, but he paid them, and he bought it for the right price, bought it low, but he went wild. But he lost his momentum. He wasn't good at it anymore. And he was at a party on Fifth Avenue, I'll never forget. And it was a party of a very, very powerful man who was having the party in a magnificent apartment overlooking the park. And I walked in, and there were 50 or so people. I recognized most of them, all the biggest business people in the world, actually. Very glamorous. I was doing well. I was young, and I was doing well. And I was invited to parties like that. And I looked in the corner, and there was Mr. William Levitt sitting all by himself on a chair, looking very glum. Nobody was talking to him, because you'll find that when you're not successful, you lose a lot of friends. It's not a good situation. But there was nobody talking to him, but I wanted to talk to him because I was in the real estate business, and he was, and most of these people were in different businesses. And I went over and talked to him, and I said, how are you, Mr. Levitt? He goes, Donald? He knew who I was. Not well. I'm not well. I said, so can you come back? He said, no, son, I lost my momentum. I shouldn't have done it. I lost my momentum. And I never forgot that expression. He lost his momentum. If he would have kept going, instead of selling and relaxing and going into a different life, he probably would have been 3 times bigger than he was, but he lost his momentum. And you have to know when it's your time. I mean, there'll be a time when you do lose. You see it with fighters. You see it with a lot of people. They have a great record and they retire, and then 4 years later they say, I'm going back. I can beat that guy, and they get knocked to hell. And it's not good. It's not good. So he lost his momentum. You have to know when your momentum time is up. I call it momentum time. But follow your momentum. It's a very important word. You don't hear it from too many, but I've seen it. I've seen it a lot. Number 6, if you want to change the world, you have to have the courage to be an outsider. In other words, you have to take certain risks and do things a little bit differently. Otherwise, if that weren't the case, everybody would be successful. Doesn't work that way. Progress never comes from those satisfied with the failures of a broken system. It comes from those who want to fix the broken system. And you'll make the bigger money, you'll make the more success by acting that way. The other way may be more secure, but if you want to go to the top, you're just never going to do it unless you break the system. Change is never easy, and the closer you get to success, the more ferociously those with a vested interest in the past will resist you. They want to resist. So I just say, trust me on that, because I know you really do. You have to break the system a little bit and follow your own instincts. But if your vision is right, nothing will hold you down. Nothing. You have to have the right vision. If you look at some of these internet people, I know so many of them. Elon is so terrific, but I know now all of them, they all hated me in my first term, and now they're kissing my ass, Do you know? It's true. All of them. It's true. It's amazing. It's nicer this way. Now, in the first, they didn't know what happened because I won an election that, there was never a businessman that won a presidential election. Out of 100%, 8% were generals and 92% were politicians. Not even admirals, not even just generals. There were 8 generals: General Washington, General Grant, General Eisenhower. But 8% were generals and 92% were politicians. And when I ran, everyone said, well, he can't win. He's a businessman. That's not going to work. And, but you have a natural instinct for things. I guess I had a natural instinct. I said to somebody, was I a better businessman or a politician? And they said, well, there are a lot of guys that made a lot of money, but there's only one guy that became president that was a businessman, so I guess you're a better politician. But I don't think of myself as a politician. I think of myself as a businessman, and I'm proud of that. And I've applied business instinct, and that's why I think you're seeing us doing so well. So number 7 is to trust your instincts, common sense. You can go very far in life with common sense, and I applied that to politics because some of these things, like they had open borders. Let everybody in the whole world flow into our country. That's not common sense. They had transgender for everybody. We ended that, if you noticed, okay? But they had transgender for everybody. They said, I said, this is not working. This is not going to work. As I said before, so simple. Men playing in women's sports. Did you ever see some of the records? Did you ever see some of these boxing matches? We have to protect. These women are great athletes, but we have to protect. If you looked at the Olympics where they had transitioned people going into the boxing, where the women had boxing, and they had a great champion, a female boxer. I mean, after one punch, you walked back to the corner, said, I can't get hit like that. I've never been hit like that before. You look at all the volleyball players that have been hurt so badly with balls that are hit at levels that they've never seen before. But the greatest is like weightlifting. You ever see the weightlifting? Where they have a record that wasn't broken in 18 years? And they have, should I imitate it? My wife gets very upset when I do this. She said, darling, it's not presidential. I said, yeah, but people like it. Should I do it or not? All right, I'm in trouble when I get home, but that's okay. What the hell? I've been in lots of trouble before. But no, you look at the weightlifting where 18 years it stands, and they have this young woman, and her parents are right where you are in the front row, and they're so proud of her, and it's like 209 pounds, and she's going to lift that. The record stood for 18, think of it, 18 years, and they put an 1/8 of an ounce here, and an 1/8 of an ounce here, little bit, and she's going to do it. Mom, I love you. I'm going to do it for you, Mom. And she goes, and she lifts, and she gets it, and Mom, I'm going to do it, Mom. Can't do it. And then a guy comes along, or a gal, or whatever. A transitioned person comes along, And he was a failed weightlifter as a man, but he comes along, 206 pounds. They put the little thing on, and he goes, boom, boom. And breaks the record like by 119 pounds. That's not right. The other one is the swimming. You've heard me talk about it. Great swimmers, and you know, they rose to the top. Women swimmers, and they grew up together. And they're Olympic-class swimmers, and they're qualifying for some big tournament. And now the race is getting ready to start, the big race, and one young lady, she was going to set the record. She fought all her life to set the record. She has to win it by one-ninth of a second. Think of that, 1/9. I don't like those odds, 1/9 of a second, right? But she looks to the left and she sees all the friends that she grew up with down in California, from all over the country. They're all the best swimmers. Then she looks to the right and she sees the same thing, but there's a person next to her who's a giant. And she looks and she, oh my God, who is that? I don't recognize that person. That was a person that transitioned, and he had the wingspan of Wilt the Stilt Chamberlain, if anybody knows what. And as you know what happened, she was very, very badly injured in that meet because he went by her so fast that she was windburned. They had to take her out. She got serious windburn. He flew back and forth, and she didn't know what, but she got the hell knocked out of her, knowing that I'm only kidding. She wasn't windburned. She was just beaten by a lot. Or the race, did you see the race where they had the best female runners, and they had a guy who was a decent runner, a long-distance race? And he won by 5 hours and 19 seconds. You know, normally you win by like 12 seconds, 2 seconds, a quarter of a second. He won by 5 hours and 19 seconds. It's crazy. And you know, honestly, it's demeaning for women, very demeaning. These are great athletes. It's very demeaning, and we're going to protect women. We're going to protect women. We're going to protect everybody.